Okay, so picture this. Your kid's in the kitchen, right, whipping up some cookies.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not just, following a recipe step by step.
Right.
They're figuring out fractions as they measure.
Oh, wow.
They're like, oh, this is the chemistry of how these ingredients work together.
Interesting.
Maybe even like thinking about history and different cultures and how that influences baking.
I love that.
That's unschooling in action.
Yeah.
But is it the right fit for every family, for every kid?
That is the question.
That's what we're diving into today. We've got all these insights and different viewpoints from scholars and socials.
A lot's to unpack.
We're going to really break down homeschooling versus unschooling.
The age-old debate.
Find those little golden nuggets, those aha moments.
I love those.
To help you figure out which path might be the best for your family.
Because there's no one right answer, is there?
Not at all.
It's about finding what works for you.
Exactly. And before we kind of like go down all these different rabbit holes,
So many paths.
let's just define what we're talking about here.
Good idea.
Homeschooling
Yes.
usually follows a more traditional kind of curriculum-based structure
Right, like school at home.
versus unschooling, where learning is driven by the child's interests,
It's more organic.
way more free-flowing.
Exactly.
And one of the things that really stood out to me from scholars and socials
Yeah.
is how much flexibility homeschooling has.
It's true. You can really tailor it.
Like you can tailor that curriculum to perfectly match how your kid learns best.
Absolutely. And they had this one example. This family, their child, was doing great in history, but really struggling with math.
I've been there.
Right. So they were able to just completely restructure their whole approach to math.
Wow.
It was amazing. They moved away from textbooks and focused on hands-on activity.
They were like actually building an experiment.
Exactly. And suddenly math wasn't so scary anymore.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's like they found a way to make it fun.
That's the dream, right?
But I'm imagining that kind of flexibility requires a lot of time from parents.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge commitment.
Scholars and socials didn't sugarcoat that at all.
They were very real about it.
It's not just about teaching the material.
You're planning lessons, researching resources.
And then you've got to think about social interaction, too.
It's a lot to juggle, for sure.
And it's a big decision.
It is.
I mean, scholars and socials even shared this story about this one family who decided to join a homeschooling co-op.
Okay.
Specifically to, help with the social side of things.
Interesting.
They said their kids were doing great academically,
Mm-hmm.
but they really felt like it was super important for them to, have that regular interaction with other kids their own age.
Makes sense.
And that's something unschooling handles very differently, right?
Totally. It's a completely different approach.
Instead of that, predetermined curriculum,
Right.
you're letting the kids' interests kind of be the guide.
It's like we were talking about before with the baking.
Exactly.
The kid making cookies, they're picking up on all these different skills and concepts just through that one activity.
But how do you make sure they're getting a well-rounded education?
Right.
If there's not that structured framework.
That's the question everyone asks.
I know I would.
And scholars and socials had some really insightful thoughts on that.
Okay, what did they say?
They basically said it's not about ditching structure altogether.
Okay.
It's more about shifting the focus.
I see.
So instead of a super rigid timetable, unschooling families might create a rhythm for their day.
Like setting aside time for reading or working on projects.
Exactly.
Even if it's not tied to a specific school subject.
Yeah, they even had this example.
Oh, tell me.
This family, they had something called Exploration Day. Once a week.
Exploration Day. What's that?
So the kids got to choose absolutely anything they wanted to explore.
Wow. Anything.
Anything. They could visit a museum, build a robot, research a historical event, whatever sparked their curiosity.
That sounds incredible.
Right. It's a great way to encourage that love of learning.
But I bet some parents would be worried about knowledge gaps.
Oh, for sure. It's a common concern.
How do you know they're covering all those important skills?
And scholars and socials address that directly.
What do they suggest?
They talked about finding ways to incorporate those essential skills into the child's existing interests.
Okay, so if your kid's obsessed with dinosaurs.
Yeah.
You could encourage them to write a story about dinosaurs.
Perfect example.
They're practicing writing skills without even realizing it.
Exactly. It feels natural and engaging for them.
I love that.
Or if they're building a tree house,
Yeah.
they're using geometry and spatial reasoning without even thinking about it.
It's like sneaking in the learning.
Exactly. You're making those organic connections.
It sounds like unschooling really requires a different mindset.
For sure, for both the parents and the child.
You're basically saying learning can happen anywhere, anytime.
It doesn't have to look traditional.
And that's what's so cool about it.
It challenges those old school ideas about education.
But it's got to have its downsides too,
Of
right?
course, no approach is perfect.
So what are the challenges?
One thing scholars and socials mentioned is the transition back into a traditional setting.
Like if a kid wants to go to college.
Exactly. That can be tough for some unschoolers.
Especially if they're used to learning at their own pace.
And following their own interests.
Right.
So scholars and socials emphasized open communication and careful planning.
So like if a family knows college is a possibility,
Yeah.
they might start adding in some more traditional elements.
Yeah. Exactly, things like standardized tests or maybe some online courses.
So it's about finding that balance again.
It always comes back to that.
Honoring the unschooling philosophy,
Yeah.
but also giving the child those tools for success.
Whatever path they choose.
And speaking of support,
Yeah.
one thing that scholars and socials kept emphasizing was community.
That's so important.
Finding your people, right?
Absolutely. Connecting with other families on a similar journey.
Sharing resources, offering support.
It makes all the difference.
And that's where something like scholars and socials is so helpful.
Definitely.
They mentioned this whole network they've built.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's a one-stop shop for families who are like, hey, we're thinking about this whole alternative education thing.
Totally. It can feel overwhelming, right?
For sure.
Especially at first.
Yeah. And they've really tapped into something important.
I think so, too.
It's not even just
Well,
about
thanks.
making the right decision. It's about having that support.
Right. You need that network.
To make that decision confidently knowing that you're not alone.
Exactly, because it can feel isolating otherwise.
Totally, like it takes a village.
100%.
You know, and as we've been talking about all this, it's got me wondering,
Yeah.
could there be a middle ground?
Oh, interesting.
Like a blend of homeschooling's structure, but also unschooling's freedom?
That's a really interesting thought.
Because it doesn't have to be so black and white, right?
Not at all. There's so much room for personalization.
Exactly.
It's all about finding what works for your family.
Right. Maybe you love the curriculum aspect, but also want to incorporate your kids' passions.
Totally. Or you're drawn to the flexibility of unschooling, but also see value in certain core subjects.
I think that's the big takeaway here.
What's that?
It's not about picking one or the other. It's about creating a path that works for your kid.
Because every child is different.
Exactly. And they shared some cool examples.
Like what?
One family used a structured math curriculum,
Okay.
but then they also did these interest-led project days.
Oh, fun.
In another family, they incorporated field trips and museum visits.
To make learning more hands-on.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
So as you're figuring all this out for your own family,
Yeah.
think about what a hybrid approach might look like for you.
What pieces resonate with you?
Because at the end of the day, it's about fostering that love of learning.
And that can happen in so many different ways.
It really can. Well said.
Think.
This has been such a great conversation.
I agree. It's always fascinating to dive into these topics.
It really is. And for everyone listening, remember, the most amazing journeys often start with a single question.
So true. Keep those minds curious.